Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are. I'm Dr. Adrian Cable, Vice President of Research and Development at Lifesize. And today and for the next 5 weeks, I'm going to be sharing some experiences with advanced collaboration. What is advanced collaboration? Well, it's how we work together beyond just video and voice, including all of the tools that we use to brainstorm, ideate, work together in a productive way based around whiteboarding, creating content together, and improving productivity wherever you choose to collaborate, whether it's your office, your home office, or somewhere else. So I've spent the last 20 years of my life in the collaboration space, working on displays, sensors, user experience, and most recently, advanced collaboration products at Lifesize. And I live and work in Silicon Valley, so I have most of the big players in the collaboration space, literally just down the road from me. So you would think that I know a thing or two about collaboration. But then March 2020 happened, the zombie apocalypse, and everything we knew went out the window. If you were unlucky, you lost your job overnight, if you're in the service space, for example. If you were lucky, like most people in the tech space, we still had to adapt. But the tools were never designed for the situation. Tools were designed for being here, where we had large spaces where we could work together physically over shared content, whether it's room collaboration systems, whether it's dry erase whiteboards. But all of a sudden, we all had to move here. I'm not that lucky. My home isn't actually this nice, but everything changed, and things aren't going back to the way they were for a long time. So many companies have announced a new working policy which is going to permit indefinite working from home as the new normal. Twitter is a great example. Everybody's going to be encouraged to work from home as the default. And even companies that previously were very office-centric, like in the financial space, Visa, for example, employees are not generally returning to the office until much later in the year. But the feeling that this trend towards work from home being a permanent thing is not universal. And there are some aberrations. So only this morning, for example, the Goldman Sachs CEO said that this new normal of hybrid work is not a new normal at all. And it's something that he called it an aberration. He wants people back into the office as quickly as possible. But that's going against the tide. And tech employment has always been demand-led, and he'll probably change his mind on that one. We'll see. And what's undeniable is that we're still learning a lot about how to be productive in the new normal. So there are some things that have transferred very well to remote work, things like video conferencing, voice conferencing. We have tools that replicate the face-to-face video experience, face-to-face interaction experience very, very well. We have Lifesize, Zoom, WebEx, Teams. There are lots of choices. They all have pros and cons. But what we haven't figured out is how to replicate the actual kind of creative part of what happens in the workplace, right? So both the kind of scheduled creativity where people get together, work maybe over a whiteboard, brainstorming, developing new things, talk, ideate. That really doesn't map very well onto into anything that works remotely today. But also the kind of what's called spontaneous creative combustion, the water cooler chat, the overhearing what somebody sitting next to you is talking about and adding something. Those kind of moments of spontaneous creativity, we just have no real way to replicate them so far. So I'll be sharing some thoughts on some directions that we're seeing to make that work better. So for the next 5 weeks, here are some things that we'll be talking about. We're going to start with a couple of sessions on hybrid work. So what is hybrid work? Well, at a very basic level, it's a mixture of work from home and working from an office. But it's a lot more than that. So we've been mixing work from home with working from an office for a long, long time. And the difference now is that we're moving towards an environment where, at least with most employers and most employees, working from home is going to be regarded as the preferable option. Whereas until now, work from home has always been second best. If you said, I want to work from home when there's a perfectly good office I can be in, you generally be looked down upon. And that's for good reason. It's because a lot of creativity happens when you're physically in a space with other people. Humans are a social animal. We have developed over the last 100,000 years by basing culture and society around face-to-face social interactions. And our experience in the workplace is an extension of that. So it's not surprising when you take that away that we have productivity problems. So hybrid work is more than just mixing work from home and work from an office as we used to. It's a new way of organizing your workspace, your desk, your mind, and your work processes, so you can be equally productive from wherever you choose to work. And that may change over time. We're seeing a lot of employers that are suggesting, in addition to work from home being the default, to have a couple of days in the office once the pandemic is over each week. So we kind of balance the advantages of being able to work from wherever you want with being able to work in the same space as other employees. But hybrid work has to be a partnership between you and your employer. The employer has to provide the right tools, which is more than just video conferencing. So during our series, we're going to be talking about those tools. It's not going to be an infomercial. I'm with Lifesize, but in order to solve this problem, the whole ecosystem needs to participate. And so I'm going to be sharing my experiences and those of people I work with not just Lifesize tools, but tools from all sorts of vendors that we have found to be incredibly helpful in maintaining productivity and creativity through this new normal. And it's not just, of course, about what your employer does. When you move to this work from home environment, you need to take on many of the responsibilities that previously your employer had infrastructure for. So you need to be your own CIO. You are now responsible to some degree for network security, because it's just as important when you're doing confidential work at home as when you are in an office that work stays private. In the enterprise, security is enforced on a number of levels. You have firewalls, you have enterprise-grade routers. At home, you need to be potentially more deliberate about how you set up your IT infrastructure to make sure that it's secure. But also, we need to understand what security really means in practice, rather than just paying lip service to encryption, for example. So we'll talk about the different sides of that and how to get a balance. Working from home is also about being your own EA. One of the upsides and downsides of work from home is that work hours are a lot less rigid. So your workday can easily sprawl from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. without any checks. And there are good things and bad things about that. So how do we manage those, and what actually happens when you get that wrong, and how do you know when you get that right? And finally, although many people have suffered enormously in the pandemic, and that suffering continues, life is all about making the most of all situations, good or bad. And so we'll also look about how we leverage the upsides of the new normal, how the average of 90 minutes commute per day has basically dropped to zero, and how we maximize what we do with that extra hour and a half we get every day, whether it's for work or achieving better work-life balance. And again, how you get that right, how you get that wrong, and how you know. We'll be talking about how to organize and run video brainstorms. So organizing a brainstorm sounds kind of anachronistic, right? A brainstorm sounds like it should be something spontaneous. So it's not easy to do it well. So I'll be sharing some real stories, some funny, some sad, and all hopefully insightful on what we found works and what we found doesn't work to try and maintain creativity, which is especially important in an R&D organization, which I lead, but also is important for any kind of work where you're creating things as part of your day-to-day job. We'll have a session about how we juggle working from home with kids at home. Here's a preview. It's really hard. And the best hint that I have as a summary is to make sure your boss has kids too. So he or she will understand when scheduling goes out the window at the last minute and things don't quite work as you would hope. And finally, we're going to have a session about interoperability. What's interoperability? Well, fundamentally, it's being able to move fluidly between different tools in different environments without having to reset up things or change workflows. So a basic example of this is when we move from our home office to a conference room in a workplace. And doing that is kind of already a pain. We have to switch cameras and get microphones and speakers working and redo that whenever we move. But especially now, as we're moving towards a more content-centric workplace, that becomes even more difficult. When you go into a room, the PC that's in that room probably doesn't have the files and presentations that you may want to present. So we're going to look at tools and techniques for making this kind of fluid, interoperable work much more productive and making sure all your devices work together. There are some problems that arrived with work from home that we'll probably never solve, and I'll share an anecdote to end today's introduction. So shortly after the beginning of the pandemic, I realized that I was going to be spending a lot of time working from my home office, which wasn't really set up for daily work. So I treated myself to a refit. And I have a friend in the furniture wholesale business, and so we managed to put together an office desk and a set and a chair, workbench, seating, all this kind of stuff from an office fit out distributor, and we got all that at a pretty good rate. And so delivery was booked. Only problem was on the morning of the delivery, the power goes out. Not a problem. My laptop's on battery. I still have the internet. Can still work. Oh, there's no internet either. What's going on? This is rather strange. Look out the window. There's a lot of commotion. Something's not right here. So I go outside, and it turns out that this big freight truck semi thing has driven down my small residential street, and I'm kind of in the middle of nowhere, so we're not talking big streets here, and had driven straight through the overhead power lines, pulled down the power lines, pulled down the Comcast lines, and everybody in my town is now without power and without internet, just because I wanted to get cheap furniture. Some things you can never predict. I wasn't really popular that day, but it makes a great story to share with you all. And we'll have plenty more enjoyable anecdotes as we go through our series. So I hope you've enjoyed the introduction. I'm Adrian Cable, and I'll see you next week for Redefining Hybrid Work, Part 1.